Chess friends, I hope you are doing well. Today, I have Magnus Carlsen, who is the #1 chess player in the world, with a peak rating of 2882, and his opponent is AlphaZero AI, the top chess engine and one of the most popular engines worldwide. This is not the actual Google AlphaZero, it is AlphaZero AI, who played against Magnus Carlsen and employed very tactical play. I will share the chess strategies and tactics he used in the game, so, let's get started without wasting any time. Magnus Carlsen began the game with e4, AlphaZero responded with e5, and after a few moves, we arrived at the Ruy Lopez, which Magnus Carlsen employed. We have knight to f6, and rather than considering knight to c3 or castling, Magnus played queen to e2, protecting the pawn, which is not a very popular move. I don't know why he played this move. His chess moves are terrible and unique in both ways, and after the bishop move, it became quite evident that he intended to capture the knight on c6. I would not have captured it with my d-pawn, and after b takes c6, it became clear that AlphaZero wanted to place his bishop on the a6 diagonal, where d5 could also be possible. Magnus Carlsen's idea took shape by capturing the pawn on the e5 square, intending to protect the pawn on e4 with his queen. Therefore, AlphaZero simply castled, and after d3 was played to protect the pawn, we saw the rook come into play, and the knight retreated to the c3 square. Do you know what AlphaZero played here? He didn't make a normal move. This is AlphaZero, after all, no one can play quite like him, and AlphaZero pushed his pawn to d5, attacking the pawn on e4, determined to punish Magnus Carlsen. Here, playing a normal move like knight to c3 would have been a very bad choice. Let me illustrate why. After exchanges, black can play a cunning move, pawn to a5. Now, castling would be a poor choice because AlphaZero can place a piece on the a6 square, and in the next move, Magnus would lose his rook, just like a 2000 rated player. Going back to the position, after playing a5, you wouldn't consider castling. The best move for white would be to consider bishop to d3, but if you didn't find that move, perhaps your brain is only capable of playing Ludo or Snake Tree, and you might consider playing bishop to d2 to put your king in a safe square. Then AlphaZero will place his bishop on a6, attacking the queen. You'll see your queen become vulnerable and have to move back to b1, and later AlphaZero can capture the pawn on an e4. After the capture, you can recapture with the rook, and after a bishop move, slide your queen to e8, attacking the bishop. The position will become very vulnerable for you. Even after the queen moves, AlphaZero can capture the bishop. After further exchanges, once the king moves to d1, AlphaZero can play rook to d8, and the position will be completely vulnerable. Even if the king moves, a move like rook to e2 check will lead to a loss of your queen, and you will soon lose the game because the king is exposed. Going back to the variations, we discovered that playing knight to c3 would be a bad choice. That's why, after Magnus played pawn to e5, AlphaZero thought for a moment and noticed that the pawn was pinned to the queen. So, what could he do to shock Magnus Carlsen further? AlphaZero played bishop to g4, pinning the knight. The pawn and knight are both pinned. Magnus responded with c3, hoping for d4, but AlphaZero punished him again by playing d4, stopping Magnus from pushing the pawn. After castling, we saw the knight move back to d7, attacking the pawn. What should white consider in this position? Think for a moment. You might say knight to d2, trying to protect the knight, but that's a bad choice. Knight takes e5, attacking the knight on f3, and you might panic. Earlier, we saw that knight to d2 was a poor choice, which is why Magnus played bishop to f4. Here, AlphaZero illustrated his 4000 Elo rating. Do you know what he played? Think a bit like AlphaZero. He pushed g5, a powerful and aggressive move, attacking the bishop. Many players might consider bishop takes g5, but that would be a terrible move. Do you know why? Because AlphaZero can sacrifice his queen as a tempo on b5. After the queen is captured, AlphaZero can recapture the queen, attacking the rook. After the rook moves, rook takes pawn, and after rook exchanges, AlphaZero will end up with 3 pieces, while Magnus will only have 2. That's completely winning for AlphaZero. Magnus should resign and play against inferior players, like some other grandmasters, not against chess engines. So, let me share a motivational quote in sudden with you. All of our losses leave a space for something even greater to take its place. It is up to us to decide what that is. Returning to the game, we discovered that capturing the pawn was a bad idea. That's why Magnus moved his bishop back. AlphaZero played f5, and capturing en passant was impossible because rook takes knight would be a devastating shock. AlphaZero's plan was to push f4. After exchanges, AlphaZero pushed f4, attacking the bishop. Moving the bishop back to h2 would be a poor choice for white. Do you know why? Because the bishop would be stuck there. AlphaZero could capture the pawn, and after the queen moves, the bishop would be stranded as if it had gone on vacation for a whole year. White would have lost a piece. Instead of moving the bishop back, Magnus thought, why should only you sacrifice pieces? I can sacrifice mine too. So, he captured the pawn on f4, then, after queen takes e6 and pawn takes d4, you could see that Magnus sacrificed a piece, but now AlphaZero couldn't capture the pawn on d4 because Magnus would play queen to c4 check, attacking the king and picking up the bishop. So, the king moved, and in a few moves, AlphaZero developed the rook and queen battery on the g-file. After a5 a4, the rook moved, and AlphaZero pinned the pawn, threatening knight to f6, exactly what he wanted. A few moves later, when the rook comes to the g6 square, attacking the queen cannot capture the knight because of queen takes g2, and Magnus will face checkmate. Therefore, a few moves later, you can see three rooks creating a battery on the g5 to attack Magnus' pawn. Magnus cannot push his pawn forward to the g3 square because black can make a cunning move that will shock the world, queen to h4, attacking the pawn. As the queen moves back, knight takes a5 will occur. After the capture, black can play a significant move, rook takes g3, the pawn is pinned down by the black bishop, and the position will be over for white. So, going back to the original discovery, pushing g3 would be a very bad choice. That's why, after the king moves, the knight simply moves back. A few moves later, you will see knight exchanges and queen to h4. AlphaZero is threatening knight to g5, attacking both the pawn and queen simultaneously. After g3 happens, kicking out the queen, a pawn move occurs, and AlphaZero still positions the knight on g5, attacking the pawn again. The white queen is overwhelmed by black's attacks. And you can see that all of white's pieces are under attack, with the knight on g5 attacking the h3 pawn. A few moves later, Magnus Carlsen resigns the game because he has no options left in this position. When Magnus can't fight, well, when grandmasters can't fight anymore, they simply resign and leave the computer open and go for a walk. After the knight check, a few moves later, queen and rook exchanges happen, leading to white's checkmate. That's why this game is so interesting, because we have AlphaZero AI competing with Magnus Carlsen. I hope you enjoyed the game very much. If so, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Wishing you all the best. Bye bye, take care, and see you soon.